Can't
You're
move.
so much wider than him. It's crazy.
I'm wider than him?
Yeah. Skin tone.
Not shame him.
It's not shame.
Can you put that in the white one?
Put that in
Yeah,
there.
I've got like no tan.
Oh, you said wider.
I thought you said wider.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I was like, that's not true. I've done 3,000 push-ups for the past 10 days. I'm hurting
I was
so
like
bad.
wider.
It's definitely white.
Yeah, dude. I thought the best place to absorb vitamin D and sunlight is being in the sun. Don't you get sunlight every day?
The logo here on this side.
No?
I run away from it 'cause I'm lazy. It's not vitamin D is what you're worried about, but yeah.
What are you worried about?
You're worried about the energy.
You're worried about vitamin D, which is one of the least amount of absorbed nutrients in our country. Most
So,
vitamin deficient.
So, but you're missing the premise here. The premise here is we would call it critical points of influence, and the earliest critical point of influence has the greatest influence on the energy cycle. So when you go through a process, the first step determines the potential for the rest of the steps. If you knock down to 50% at step 1, by step 7, you can only still be at 50. Does that make sense? You can't gain back loss on total potential.
So you're never going to go outside and get your 15, 20 minutes of sunlight a day. Is that what you're saying? In a very scientific way?
No, what I'm saying is vitamin D is part of step 7. So getting sunlight, the reason it's important is because of step 1, which is the infrared and ultraviolet light energy being absorbed into your body.
Mm-hmm.
So the energy aspect of it. That triggers all these processes, which eventually lead to a use for vitamin D as part of your biological system.
Okay, I get all that.
But yeah, I feel like I still get enough, even though I'm not tan.
Do you?
Yeah.
When's the last time you got a physical? Did you get that checked up?
I had a physical probably like 6 months ago, and they said I was healthy as fuck. I had no cavities.
The doctor said healthy as fuck.
Pretty much. He said he was surprised I was a smoker, is what he said actually.
Oh yeah, I love going to the doctor. I love having that patient-doctor confidentiality, and they're just like, okay, so what do you do in your spare time? You know,
I smoke a lot of weed and I play video games and grow plants. And
well,
like,
I
wow.
drink, and then I go through the whole smorgasbord of everything else I do, and they're just usually like, how are you alive?
Yeah.
The best part is telling them you do psychedelics, and they're just like, you've done LSD?
Yeah.
You've done psilocybin mushrooms? They
Yeah.
don't say psilocybin, they just got mushrooms now. The doctor doesn't even know the scientific term.
Yeah.
Or was it the animal kingdom name? Psilocybin would be for it? Or is that the plant name?
I think it is psilocybin cubensis, so I think it is part of the scientific name. Yeah. I believe that it's genus species is actually the way it's categorized. And then family would be another designation, but I think the way they're named is genus species.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's great to know more than a doctor. But anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I liked it. Like, it's really they were in the first era of humankind where if you read up on a topic and you do the right research, you will be more or as well informed as many experts at certain aspects of the topic. So like you can really learn about like a mushroom, several types of mushrooms, and be an expert.
Well, that's the great thing now. Doctors are going to have to learn about psilocybin at least. It's now in 2 states. It's passed medicinally. So now doctors can start prescribing, or what kind of doctor is going to be prescribing it? Is that going to be the shrink? Is that going to be your family doctor? Oh, you just need a little bit of an eighth of mushrooms. I'm going to send you home with a nice eighth. What a time.
It'll probably be psychologists if I had to guess, but there's a lot of psychology studies, I think is where it all came out of. It's just showing benefits for, I think the recommendations are like once every 3 to 6 months or so.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you to go trip.
I think that's a black market prescription right there as well. Every 3 to 6 months, go take a good trip.
Yeah. It seems to be scientifically backed now. So some would say that's true scientific process. Is letting animals operate in nature and seeing what their habits form. And their habits, if they're completely unfettered, will end up resulting in the best case scenario, if that makes sense. So like if you leave any animal out in nature, it's going to naturally select itself into the most survivable version of itself. Humans are the only animals in the world that do this in the opposite way, where we ruin the efficiency of things. Everything else, just by existing, makes the environment more efficient.
So are you saying it's going to be a good thing that mushrooms are now being prescribed by doctors?
Yeah. Well, it's the more natural interactions we stop outlawing, the more you'll have natural interactions with medicine again. Versus same thing with food, same thing with everything. We had this from like the 1970s to the 1990s. We had this obsession with what humans could create. So we were creating these combinations of chemicals and minerals that are in formulations that natural systems have never interacted with. And then we put them in scenarios where they weren't tested the way Mother Nature usually tests new things. So they got special treatment, and they really were exploited for profit. But most importantly, they're just not as beneficial as natural processes. So it's weird that they were allowed to survive.
Mm-hmm.
But we have this, like I said, humans are the only ones who create ulterior motives that aren't a long-term success to the equation, but give individuals isolated success.
And we're seeing a bunch of that now. Well, we saw a bunch of that, like you said, that we were able to strip down the corn plant, or even like coconut oil, like we were talking about yesterday.
Mining. I mean, we can go through oil drilling. All of these are non-sustainable business models that are built off of unsustainability. And even the markets themselves become that way, to where like oil's either making you rich or it's a boom or bust market.
But it's kind of like we were talking about the Dr. Seppi guy. Dr. Seppi is Nipsey Hussle's doctor, or I mean, what's that relation? I don't even know.
So from
Nipsey
my understanding,
Hussle,
Nipsey just wanted to make a documentary about the man, and he was one of the few individuals who claimed to have cured cancer and HIV with a plant-based diet and meditation and fasting. So basically, through natural remedies and I would say holistic solutions, he not only cured individuals, but then went to court with the government because I believe he was either facing jail time or suspension of his license or several.
For what?
For claiming to cure. You can't claim to cure cancer and HIV without being able to back that, and he won. So he was very, very old when he died.
What year was this? 'Cause I didn't even hear about this till recently when Nipsey Hussle passed away. And then guys start shouting out Dr. Seppi, Dr. Seppi. I'm hearing Dr. Seppi
I just thought it was so conspiracy theorists.
Well, I've heard other people talk about it too. Other people are like, yeah, Nipsey Hussle, you got a Dr. Seppi then. Like it seems like they go two and two together. Well, I didn't even know who Nipsey Hussle was until he passed away. I wasn't
a big Nipsey fan either, to be honest. I just knew of him because he was making a documentary about Dr. Seppi. So I'm sure I'm one of the rare reverse engineer. Like I found Nipsey through Dr. Seppi.
Me too. Guilty.
But yeah. So it's just one of those things that comes back to your body has so many natural processes that we don't even look towards because the past generation before us were obsessed with this alternate chemical medicines are alternate medicines. Mm-hmm. Like that's just the reality. Plants aren't the alternative medicine. It's what people have been using as medicine and are the basis of chemical medicines. Mm-hmm. Those are alternative medicines that we invented in the 60s and to current time. So what do we have? Like let's call it 60 years of alternate chemical medicines. And about 20,000 years of natural herbal medicines is what humans have been utilizing. So if you think of it that way, plant-based medicines or really just homeopathic influencers, because that's really what a lot of plants do, in my opinion, is they can change your homeostasis. Mm-hmm. So whether it be minerally, whether it be an immune response, whether it be a catalyst for digestion, for your microbiology, they really play the connecting role between your microbiology and your energy system.
I mean, what about the soil not being that nutrient dense? Because I know that's a big problem. When I had Sean Baker on the show, I know you listened to what he had to say.
Yeah.
The same thing was about, these plants have these nutrient value in it. It's whether can we extract it from it or do the plants have that in it anymore itself. I mean, you're talking about the land being stripped and all this stuff and all these plant medicines being there for 20,000 years, and that is true. Mm-hmm. But now, I mean, have we completely destroyed the soil and the plants, that the biodiversity or the nutrition that comes in the plants just not even there anymore?
Well, I would say biodiversity is still being preserved because there's enough like-minded farmers across the world that try to preserve biodiversity. The key is getting it back into the mainstream. Like I said, I think we've gone into it's two factors. The first factor is this new alternative farming, which they now call conventional farming, which in my mind doesn't make sense because once again, we farm
farming.
Well, in my opinion, it should be called alternate farming because the way that we have farmed for thousands of years was growing using manures and other plant scraps as fertilizers.
Yeah,
decay, which is the natural process, versus after around the
Real quick, this is a personal question.
Yeah.
I got some of those mint leaves falling. Should I let those just get right back in the soil and be eaten up, or do I?
Yeah. Make a mulch layer.
Sorry for everybody, but I have to find out now.
Yeah. Use it as a mulch layer. So instead of using mulching and manures and wastes as the fertilizer, we went to alternate farming and we started, which they now call conventional farming, which is using chemical fertilizers and chemical pesticides. And really it was pushed by the companies who created them. So they started subsidizing it through the government, and then farms became dependent on the subsidies, and now we're at the point where Republicans are socializing farming in America. We're now socializing the corn and bean market. So it just shows you how far they've pushed socialist farming, and it's kind of ruined the quality because when you're using these chemicals and these pesticides, you don't ruin the mineral values. The mineral values are still there, but the microbiology, that is the connection between the minerals getting from the soil to the plants in a highly efficient and effective way to create mineral diverse and mineral rich plants, is what's being devastated. So the overall fertility, the availability of the minerals have been exponentially reduced in this era.
Is that because the field's not being, the crops aren't being switched up? I mean, we grow one crop and so...
So crop rotation is kind of a myth. It's polyculture.
Really?
Yeah, so there's no crop rotation in nature. I tell people just go back. What is science? The study of nature. So let's study nature, right? Let's go back to nature.
Listen, I play... old fighting games like Age of Empires. So I know when I had to farm that field, one of the new technologies was
rotating crops.
Rotating your crops. You know, it was a brand new. You went to the Iron Age right there, and it was like big times, big things happen.
So
you got more food. So that's where I know this from, and some of my biology lessons in high school. So you're saying this is a myth?
So the next game is gonna have polyculture. And what's interesting is, so Western civilization ruined this. So the ancient culture in Mexico.
Is there gonna be a virtue signaling gonna coming right here?
No. It's just a factual assessment of farming.
Okay.
This is a factual.
I thought it was a hatred of white Western civilization.
Well, in this case, I mean, sure, you can form your opinion on the factual historical situation that occurred. You know, whether you liked it or not. So in Mexico, there's this society called Tenochtitlan. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it.
Tenochtitlan.
There you go.
Capital
It was
of
this
Aztec Empire.
Boom.
In Mexico City.
So in this city, it was a city on a lake. And the entire way that the city was designed is that they could irrigate their fields that were inside of the city with this lake. So they would have nature irrigate the fields through the lake, and they'd be able to control it. And they had a market, and everybody was able to afford all the food there. There was no poverty because everything was so sustainable. The price of food was very, very low.
I'm so mad. Like, that's another place back in time if I could go to. It'd be Tenochtitlan, 1518, right before Cortez got there.
So, yeah, before anybody. So, and at that time, it was millions of people lived there.
No, they had 250,000 estimated that were living there.
I'm
big on pre-Columbian history, so...
I thought they said during market days it would swell to over 1 million, maybe 2
people
million.
outside, but yeah, the inhabitants of 250K, but I could see it could swell, yeah.
Yeah, well, you have a market.
So we're both not wrong. There we go.
Maybe.
Right?
I could probably be wrong.
Would definitely swell to 1 million on a market day.
So we'll just leave it at the fact that you had this city that was in a indigenous, backwards, third world country that was able to operate more efficiently than modern cities. So if you're able to scale these cities instead of having massive metropolises, if you had, let's say New York is, let's say a major city is 20 million. If you had 40 of these instead of one major city, you'd have sustainable lifestyles for these masses of people. You'd be a lot more distributed throughout the United States. You'd have a lot more happy people, less poor people, because things are more efficient. Now you have to design polyculture, naturally irrigated systems that depend on microbiology. They weren't using chemicals. They weren't using pesticides. They were using polyculture. And the reason that polyculture works is multifaceted. So one aspect of it is different plants will cultivate different microbiology.
Mm-hmm.
So the more diversity of plants you have, the more diversity of microbiology you have. So the more diversity of microbiology you have,
Sure, a bunch of different things just growing in the same field.
exactly. And then what you let Mother Nature do is Mother Nature will show you which ones should be growing there or not. The things that shouldn't be growing there will die.
Mm-hmm.
The things that flourish are meant to grow there. And what'll end up happening is the succession of plants or the succession of microbiology. As the microbiology becomes more fungally dominant, more complex plants will be able to live there. So once the soil rebuilds the microbiology, so remember, let's say the chemical's devastated, no microbiology, too much Roundup. We start re-inoculating with compost the microbiology, more and more fungus will be there. All of a sudden, trees will start flourishing.
Mm-hmm.
So these complex plant systems will start flourishing. Once you start having trees, you're able to have fruits and other and large harvests so that you can have ruminants and like cows and stuff that eat the grasses. They reproduce the grass. You have other animals running in eating the fruits. And that's how really an ecosystem, what we would call regenerative. So regenerative polyculture is the next age of empire addition that you would progress your civilization to.
Now, have you always been a farmer? Or do you even consider yourself a farmer today?
I'm definitely a farmer today. I was definitely not a farmer for most of my life. I really didn't get into farming until I got out of what I called the me life. So when I was an athlete and I was trying to, be Michael Hinden, the greatest soccer player ever,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really care about anything that wasn't me and progressing my development exclusively. And then it kind of took a little bit of injury, me getting into cannabis kind of diverted my attention away from me a lot. And then I really got into nurturing cannabis. And once you start nurturing plants, you start like kind of reassessing the hierarchy of what I would say human arrogance anyways. Because I know myself, you always put yourself above things that are, we'll call, less vocally sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start appreciating how sophisticated a plant is, or fungus and bacteria, you in my opinion, start being able to appreciate activities such as farming, which is really nurturing. It's caring about something that's really almost nothing to do with you for delayed satisfaction.
It's probably one of our biggest arrogances would be arrogances, is that the plural? The thing we're most arrogant about is our lack of understanding of other species on the planet. Like whether it's we don't understand what this dolphin's saying, so it can't be intelligent. It's almost intelligent because it can speak, but it doesn't speak what we want to hear. The thing we can comprehend. Same thing with plants being able to communicate. I know you've said this before. There's a whole Radio Lab episode about it. There's a tree over here like about 20 feet away that's struggling to get water. Let's send more water its way through the roots.
So I saw
let's
that
take less
not
water.
20 feet. I saw something that says several miles.
They can do several miles.
So like trees, so when you start getting these complex fungal networks, remember we're talking about the development of microbiology. And this is what I tell people, so appreciate even more basic than the plants. Let's go microbiology. Because once those are very complex and developed, the fungal networks can communicate miles. So trees on one side of the forest can communicate with the other side of the forest. As soon as there's drought stress, they say they can track and visually see these infrared signaling that goes along through the soil. So yeah, miles, and it is all dependent on its symbiosis with fungi. And that's why I always go back to that conversation. Remember, we talk about even human diet and soil diet, plant diet, is all, in my opinion, based on maximizing fungal symbiosis. Because remember, fungus is different than plants and animals. It's not part of the animal kingdom, but it's more animal than plant.
And now able for prescription from your psychiatrist.
Exactly.
Psilocybin mushrooms.
And that's one example of how powerful, in my opinion, fungus can be as a facilitator for something else.
Like we said, it's a whole different subset of the animal kingdom. It's not an animal. It's not a human.
Well, remember,
being.
It's not even a subset. It's a different kingdom.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of people, I feel like my brain has always saw it as a plant. I always thought it was a plant. Or a bacteria, but it's actually or like a single-celled organism, but it's actually off of when it split it split away from plants as something on its own, and then animals came after that. So it's like more animal than plant, technically.
Yeah, there's even crazy theories that it came, how life came on a meteorite from outer space, and that fungi as well came from on a meteorite as a different subset. And
so just talk about that as a theory. So whether it came from it spontaneously created on Earth, or God placed it on Earth, or a
Adam and
meteor.
Eve,
Who says Adam and Eve wasn't the first story of mankind after God put fungus on Earth? Because according to the development of life, bacteria and plants weren't enough to get to animals. We needed fungi first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how essential they are to the connection.
Well, single cell, yeah. We started with the single cell.
Well, without the fungi, there's no connection. So if you took them out of the key, then you'll never have animals with just plants and bacteria. It's just not possible. You can't even have complex plants. So why not? Certain plants can't accumulate certain minerals without fungi. So why are not using pesticides and chemical fertilizers that kill fungi so important? Because you're literally preventing the plant from being able to uptake the complex minerals that only fungi help plants uptake.
Why would any pesticides want to kill the fungi?
Well, they're not doing this on purpose. They're focusing on something else.
Yeah, but I'm saying
these are like unintended consequences.
Can't we, strip that down? I mean, I thought that's the whole thing about
Could
Roundup.
we get rid of all side effects in medicine?
Roundup and Bear?
So, I mean, for example, Roundup has so many unintended consequences that end up killing microbiology over significant periods of time. It takes sometimes years to remediate. And the only way to remediate it is with microbiology. We haven't been able to how do we remediate even oil in the ocean? Microbiology. These are the only organisms.
The algae, the fungi, to go back and eat it all up.
So
and then to process it and emit it as oxygen or carbon back in the atmosphere.
Well, they break it down into their most basic forms. And because they're these little decentralized organisms that
decentralized, I like that.
So what I often tell my buddies who are into crypto, I say crypto will mimic microbiology. Once software engineers understand how microbiology specializes and decentralizes work, and like your body is the perfect decentralized system. Your animal cell literally adopted its own blockchain called mitochondria to become an animal cell. It brought it into its cell, and then it became an animal cell. That was a different organism. Then it started connecting with other organisms, bacteria and fungi, to where your body now is 51% or more microbiology. So you're more microbiology than human.
Oh, totally.
And then
is it because that many microbiologies live in our bodies?
It's because your cells need that much to support their existence.
I mean, just in our gut, what do you have? Like trillions of different bacteria in there?
Every inch of you, your skin, your hair, on the inside lining of your lungs, every bit of you is coated in microbiology because every animal cell needs certain specialized microbiology to support its existence. It's necessary. Just like, remember we talked about how the animals need the fungi to connect to plants?
Well, I know we talked about mitochondria is a offset of a bacteria that evolved to be the energy sources of our body. It was bacteria before, or was it a virus, or?
I can't really classify it because I'm not that good with the terminology. But it was a separate organism that was incorporated into an animal cell.
Talk about going back in time to be at a moment like when the mitochondria got linked up to the energy source of human cells.
Yeah, and you had an advancement in energy cycling. So humans, many would say, are just the most advanced energy cycling.
Think about that treaty, though.
What a great. So it's not even.
But the human cell mitochondria just said, "Hey, today's the day."
Unspoken truth. This both works for us in every single way. We don't even need to talk about it. Let's just cycle energy more efficiently.
How old do you think that is? Like a 2 million year old thing? Because I mean, we've been this form of humans for 200,000 years. If we're talking about the deepest kind of human, they've done the first evolution from away from a primate or away from
well, you're talking about the first
2
animal
million years
cell,
ago.
Bro.
I know, but
would that
be 4 billion? We're talking
about probably billions.
So that mitochondria got into an animal cell, and then there was a symbiosis over thousands of years, I'm sure.
And there's a whole debate whether or not that started on Earth. See, the evolution thing is a touchy subject, but the more important part is that these systems only work on the Earth when they're utilizing the decentralized redundancies of microbiology. And what this ensures is that you have an in-between layer of raw substances and your biology that is making things available for you. And that's really what it comes down to. And your body has a positive response. Your immune system is dependent. Everybody understands this. The more things you interact with, the more diverse your immune system becomes.
Mm-hmm.
So literally, the more diverse your microbiology is, the healthier your immune system is.
Look at my general scale I do that on. The more engagement and interaction I do with my guests, the things they are, you have a more multi-diverse consciousness and personality.
It is very anti-fragile to be able to engage with a broad diversity of anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the more things change, you have more options to change with it, to where you're benefiting from the change. Other people who are stuck in a singular direction, chemicals only, for example, is very fragile. What happens when the cost of that chemical becomes high? Very fragile.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be so decentralized that you could throw a farmer anywhere in the world and they can utilize the local microbiology to unlock the minerals in the foliage around them, no matter where they go, no matter what foliage is around them, they'll always, whether they're in a desert, anywhere, they'll be able to cultivate the microbiology. They'll be able to expand upon it. And an example of this is in Australia. Alex Podolinsky did 200 acres in 3 years from sand to 18 inches of topsoil. And all through the work of microbiology.
How do you do that?
Through
Like, what
regenerative agriculture.
Or what's it called?
A regenerative polyculture.
Okay.
So he utilized you start with the microbiology and the foliage in the local area, and usually you would inoculate with some local cover crop, they would call it, which is a diversity of different grasses and other crops. And you start every single time that you would chop the grasses and different cover crop you're growing. When that decomposes, you're going to get a mineral addition as well as a bunch of high-grade localized microbe food, and build the microbiology. And as the microbiology builds, the quality and fertility of your soil is expanded upon in depth, pretty much.
You gotta send me that link. I want to show these people what that looks like, or I want to see it at least, with
Yeah.
the 18-inch layer of topsoil after being sand and dust, and not dust, but just sand and desert.
It's basically desert, yeah.
Okay.
So it really comes down to there's a couple great books, and I think we talked about this on a previous podcast as well, actually, where we talked about how civilizations really depend on the fertility of their soils, and it really comes down to what you need to live is high quality, low cost food. And
Well, for civilization, not for humanity, for civilization.
so basically, I believe that the fertility of your soil directly correlates to the humanity of your civilization, because it ends up providing the food source, the healthy food source, for those who are least fortunate. So, for example, in my opinion, the most significant way to advance modern society as we know it would to be at least be able to have healthcare and quality food that's affordably available. So right now, if you wanted organic, high-quality food, you're paying a premium for it. At one aspect, we should be promoting, or at least educating the public into allowing capitalism to promote the selection of organic, properly cultivated, because organic is even a watered-down term nowadays. But
isn't anybody can claim to be organic technically?
Well, no, there is a process, but the process, in my opinion, is significantly flawed, because you need to be, in many cases, only 51% organic. So it comes down to
How do you be 51% organic?
most of your products that you use are certified organic. So you could still use non-organic things and be certified organic. So I find that to be a little bit of a contradiction. I think people need to educate themselves on what products are being cultivated in living soils with rich microbiology.
Well, I think you can even look at barcodes now, and you can know if it's a GMO. I think it even goes down to the barcode if this is GMO, or if it's certified organic. And there's another tier now of organic that's like the kind of it's going to have information on it, or it's going to be something that's certified on a higher level. I think
I'm interested to check that out.
Because there was a guy who I talked to, Fabian Garcia in New York City. Great trainer. Love all you. Does a lot of study on Russian training, Russian medicine, and especially we're talking about the negative ions.
Yeah,
He does a lot of interesting things. You'd really like what he does. Trying to have him on the show. He has got all these different medicines and things like, I mean, patches. They say, okay, we're going to get you this patch that's going to have this straight transmission of B12 or this, or I'm going to personally move your muscles and your organs around. It may empty your entire insides out right now, but we need to move this energy using what's the infrared to measure where different organs in your body may be emitting or not emitting or processing. So he works with a lot of stuff you talk about and you're interested in.
Yeah.
He's an interesting personal trainer. PT,
Yeah. Sounds like he knows what's up. There's another friend of mine, Ryan Conley, who
Davey guy?
Yeah, he uses there's some of this electromagnetic technology that you use as, so STEM is alternating currents, but this technology uses direct currents. So this is how your body uses electricity. So it doesn't use alternating currents. It actually uses the direct current, and it uses
the whole AC DC you see on your light switch.
So DC, if you can use a DC current, you can manipulate your electromagnetic energy cycling throughout your body. So he uses a machine, and there's these guys who go in to fix their knee, and all of a sudden their hearing's coming back. Their eyesight's getting better. So just this beneficial electromagnetic therapy is helping their energy functioning, and instead of having negative side effects, these treatments are having positive side effects. And that's when I feel like you start getting into very sustainable treatments and processes, when the side effects of what you do are positive. That's how you know they're anti-fragile, is when something changed. You didn't end up with leaky butt. You ended up seeing better. Side effects include, we've seen people increase their hearing, increase their eyesight. Those are good side effects. It's like the side effects of exercise.
That's like what well, I'm a big proponent of that carnivore diet, or even someone who goes just completely plant-based after eating a certain way for such a long time. You are trying to strip away all these different channels of different nutrients or different things that may be causing different side effects. You know? Like you look at somebody and say, "Oh, I have back pain." Like, "Oh, hold on." I'll never look at someone's back when they say that to me. I'm like, okay, how's your hamstrings? How's your Achilles tendon? How's your hip flexor? Can you rotate your hip? Can you even bend into below a 90-degree squat? Okay, you may be tight elsewhere. Before we're going to even look at your back, let's take away the inflammation of everything that's so closely tied to your back. And I think that's the big thing with diet.
Points of influence.
Diet as well. Let's completely strip away where someone's, because like the meat thing's interesting, because like plants, you can get all your nutritional value from eating just like, let's say, the animal or the red meat. So if you can do that and you can strip away like just where one of your energy sources, where you're drawing energy from the food you eat, it's the same thing that you can like strip away and say, okay, well, soy has been taken out. Well, I don't have this effect anymore. I think nightshades are the biggest thing we talked about. Tomatoes, eggplants, peppers.
So let me counter it though. So
I'm not countering. I'm agreeing. Where are you coming from now?
I'm going to counter though.
Here we go.
Because I'm going to say you think you're agreeing, but I'm disagreeing. Ready?
Here we go.
So there's this philosophy I like best that is part of this theory in agriculture that they call Jadam, which really is do as nature does. And he would say there is no duality. So even in that analysis, soy was bad.
Terrible.
See, this doesn't go with the theory I'm with. Like I said, so I have to disagree.
I'm not with soy though.
So, but what I would say is you should be with everything, but you have to understand the balance that thing needs. Maybe soy is something you need a tablespoon a year. Maybe it's something you need 5 grams a year.
I don't think you should put it in your coffee every day.
Okay, so everything is a poison. Everything is if it's natural, if it exists in nature.
Well, I would say psychedelic effect, like from something from mushrooms, is just based merely a poison or a reaction to the poison you're putting in your body.
Well, hold up here. There is doses that do not have a toxic reaction, but you get the benefit from it.
Yeah.
So that's what people call medicinal doses.
But I would say even like a psychoactive trip or a psychoactive reaction could be a poison reaction to it.
That's not though.
Because but it can be. It can be claimed that because that's how some people. I mean, you eat something wrong, you lick the back of a frog, and you're having a psychoactive trip because it's poison reacting to the body.
So you created a duality for psychoactive response. It's a response for sure. You're having a response, but you've created a negative duality to it. Now,
I wouldn't say it's a negative duality.
For sure, but I'm saying in that analysis, you still, even if you consider it a positive, you considered it a duality because of something. Now the art theory I'm going with here is that one in itself can't be the measuring stick. The only measuring stick that I've seen in a chemical analysis is stress or pleasure response. So if you have the ability to respond to that psychoactive change. So are you anti-fragile? Are you going to benefit from the change? Or are you fragile? And is this a toxic? So with with anything with your brain, you usually have more control over than the physical nature of it.
Agreed.
Now, when we're talking about pure physical nature, everything is toxic or beneficial based on its concentration. So salt in too high of a concentration will kill you. Water in too high of a concentration will kill you, and both for opposite reasons. So in too little, you need it, it becomes a supplement. Both of those things, salt or water. Too much, it becomes toxic. Replace water or salt with any element in the world, any mineral in the world, any natural combination of things. So most things, humans or fungi or plants, naturally process that thing, and they have levels in which that thing becomes toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So really it's a concentration thing. So when we go back to any diet, what I find interesting about these strict diets is we've learned that when we isolate our diet pathway, we can eliminate our excesses, and we actually find balance in this radical view.
It's one of the main reasons I go those routes.
You get to discover things that without going radical, you would have never gained this very edge perspective. So you go nothing but plant. Okay, you get to learn a bunch of things about a plant diet you never would have learned unless you had to be plant-based. So let's go the other way. Let's say you go straight carnivore.
Makes you completely make and the experiences and lets you make sure that's anti-fragile.
So, experience it all, and then
the bus driver experience.
And then I would say the bus driver challenge after the experience. Well, we'll call it the private stock challenge. Is to take your experience, implement it into your life after, because then you can achieve balance. And that's what I think people look for in happiness. Is something that you can only experience pursuing balance. So when you pursue balance, you end up being sustainable enough in what you do that you get to enjoy it. You're not overworking, and you're not under motivated. You find that perfect balance of I'm energized and excited to get up and work every day, and I get to pull my full amount of energy and work really hard every day. That balance allows you to actually enjoy your work. Whereas if you work too hard, you're not going to enjoy it. You're unmotivated, you're not going to have success, so you're not going to enjoy it.
That's why I have this book right here. It's literally just doesn't leave my side.
Relentless.
Yeah. And I'm literally that cleaner. Like, any little satisfaction you get, it's like you can barely enjoy it. You can barely just give yourself a pat on the back, and you're already just looking.
You're looking to the future,
for the next mountain,
or you're judging your past.
No, looking for the next mountain to jump over.
Well, so that's the future.
Yeah.
So what they would say is the only way to start synchronizing with what you're doing is to stay present in the moment. So be relentless, but don't think about the next moment. Stay present, and when you stay present, you can synchronize with everything that is presently here with you. Because Mother Nature is always present. It doesn't think ahead.
But that's the thing. I would say I'm present. Very, 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 very much so. In terms of engaged, understanding, listening, perceiving, and getting to understand someone I'm talking with, or someone I'm like doing whatever it is, unique thing that they do. However, that motivation or that will to just take in everything and learn everything. And try to understand everything, and because that's life. I just want to get as filled with the jelly donut in my brain as I can.
For sure.
Just and then when I can do that, but again, by looking forward to all those things, you enjoy it. But again, it's just trying to find the balance.
So I think the balance comes from pursuing versus manifesting. And this is where I know you always give me crap because I get a little bit of hoobie-doobie with it.
We'll see. We'll let everybody else judge here.
We'll let everybody judge me whether this makes sense or not. But when you pursue something, you leave the possibility for failure. When you manifest something, you have decided that you have enough grit, you have enough stick-to-itness, that you're going to do it. It's going to get done. So when people positively are motivated, they have stick-to-itiveness, they manifest their destination. They go, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to achieve it. When you pursue something, you already have programmed in an option for failure. I tried really hard. I gave it my best effort. This is my issue with the participation trophy.
I get shameful just thinking about I feel shame just thinking about the person who says something like that.
So
It gets me mad.
So, and then I would say, but when you're having pure manifesting, something like that can never upset you.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can appreciate that person just isn't manifesting. So instead, in my opinion, you become empathetic. And then it goes back to the humanity conversation, to where when you're pursuing something, so just the fact that you're upset that they're not manifesting, you realize that you're not manifesting. Does that make sense? So
Repeat that last part about manifesting and not manifesting.
So if you're upset that somebody isn't motivated, right? That really means that you're insecure, you're not motivated. And you're letting that be your motivation. That's not a sustainable motivation.
Oh, no, definitely not.
So what happens? It happens naturally.
I mean, I was definitely guilty. I've definitely.
Oh, it happens to me every
all
day.
The time.
When and being able to address that and then create a new manifestation of pure intention makes it sustainable.
Well, I mean, how do you think people gain that awareness? Is it just going through the multi exchanges and experiences in life? Because I would say, just the fact that
being
podcast,
present,
but just a podcast, like getting to that level of self-reflection, or someone who knows about cryptocurrency or podcasting, like it's a very, very, very small subset of the population that even listens to these things or understands these things. And I think it's the same thing goes with politics. I think people get so trapped in a bubble that they're so not present or aware of what people think, how other people could think. That level of self-reflection, I don't know if that comes from, putting yourself in different shoes every day, taking a smoke of a joint at night before you go to bed, sitting down and just listen to yourself breathe or meditate, or writing what's going on in your head on a piece of paper. I think it's a great exercise. But how do we get people? I mean, because most people don't think that. It's crazy to think that people can't think outside that bubble, but it's really hard. Or we built these parameters and walls of society and civilization up that, people have these horse blinders on and they can't veer outside of it. It's just, this is the way, this is the path. I lose sight of me.
So I think the Tibetan monks are the first ones to figure it out, because their children are actually showing very, very balanced brain function and functioning at very high levels.
Tibetan monks can have kids?
Yeah. I'm almost positive.
You sure?
They definitely have children in the monastery, so whether the kids come in or they're the kids of the monks, I'm not sure. But the kids are taught...
Sounds like a whole Catholic Church thing right there.
Whatever it may be.
I'm not knocking the Tibetan monks. They are some enlightened cats. Dalai Lama,
all
I'm coming for you.
Is if we can teach the awareness, the presence that they teach their children in school, just like we teach everything else, and because it's a skill. So you teach kids to be present and aware to everybody else's presence and awareness, and people will choose empathy over judgment. So wherever judgment comes from is ego trying to understand. So your ego is going to try to understand by differentiating, and usually you differentiate what you choose over what other people choose. So if you're aware and you're present, you're willing to let somebody else be present with you instead of dictating their presence. So one of the criticisms I often hear you give certain people, you're like, oh, they only allow certain guests on their shows if they're willing to say their message. They don't want to give them airtime. Certain, let's say like Fox News or ABC, will only want to give a guest time because they know what the person's message is.
Well, I've said that?
Sort of in a way of saying people's messaging is expected or biased. And what I would say is basically what you were saying was the problem in America is that people can't get out of their bubble. This bubble is their messaging.
Well, I wouldn't even say it's the messaging. I'm just even talking about the mindset. Before you were even getting down to the politics.
Well, I would say they're the same
politics
thing.
aside is like, hey, listen, I live in New York, I live in California. I just don't know how people could see life and think this way. And if they don't think the way I think, I'm going to take the worst word we have for people in our society.
And call them that.
Well,
that ends up being your politics.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, if you're a coastal elite, you usually associate, and that's what I was saying, the Democrat and Republican Party, in my opinion, just turned into, if you're a coastal elite and you view these values, you'll vote Democrat. Basically, college education, white-collar jobs. If you're blue collar and you're conservative, you're going to end up trying to, and religious values are high, you're going to end up being a Republican. And then you call those other people whatever you like. So what were we talking about? I don't even know.
Politics. We're talking about the values of people. If you're going to be coming from a certain part of the country, you're going to have these kind of values. And you're actually the one that pointed that out to me. And I really didn't see that until a relationship. And then you said, well, if you're two people with different sets of values,
Yeah.
you really have to come from a kind of place, or the same kind of place. You know, our world is so multicultural, and we have people from everywhere who can connect with each other, whether it's in a relationship, whether that's intimately, whether that's just a friendship or a line of communication.
Yeah.
Like when you get down to the nitty gritty to really understand somebody and know who they are,
Mm-hmm.
you kind of got to understand their values, and you kind of got to express your values to that person so they know the things those are your core tenets, things you believe in.
Yeah.
And when you have to understand those things, and
And
we don't even understand those as a people right now.
I would say, and what's worse is that we're more unwilling to tolerate other people's priorities than ever before. So we used to be able to go, okay, this is what's most important to me. I can respect that. This is what's most important to me. Let's see if we can both get what's most important to each other.
Is that it? Because I think it's like otherwise. Like my priorities trump everybody else's.
Oh, I think that's the way it is now.
And I don't care what you think at all. I don't even want.
Yeah.
If I don't want to hear you speak,
Yeah, yeah,
where you're speaking from is an area of hate.
yeah.
You are talking hate speech. I can't communicate with
Yeah.
someone like you. That virtue signaling right there is like the most
Yeah.
interesting thing to listen to people talk now. And I wasn't really listening to see if I could identify virtue signaling, but then you
Yeah.
listen to it and you hear someone like completely put someone down and then add that layer of smugness with the I. This person's bad. I can't believe in that. And it's funny because those people are usually the ones that hate Donald Trump the most.
Yeah, yeah.
But listening to him talk, he virtue signals
Just as
like
badly.
on the most conservative level,
Yeah, yeah.
like to the zenith. And then
Yeah.
people who hate him do the same exact thing. They don't really, again, where's that level of self-reflection and awareness?
Remember we talked about, so what really upsets you when you're not manifesting what you believe in and instead you're pursuing it, when you see somebody else do the thing that you are trying not to do and they do it worse than you, it really aggravates you. But it goes back to this whole like your little, like you hate that in yourself, and you got to be willing to just identify it and kind of just let it be as it is.
That's the Lucy Rhee shadow effect we talked about outside. That's the thing that people who know these things, they don't know how to convey these things or portray these things to other people. Then everybody just says, oh, that's just your fucking feelings. That doesn't make sense at all. We all want something tangible to tie it to.
Yeah, yeah. And really what it comes down to me is whenever I see that reaction, is usually I just try to point out to the fact that don't let it creep. If you hate it in this instance, don't let it creep into the same way you're going to approach the solution. Mm-hmm. So realistically, what I think is inevitable is you're going to end up having a reincarnation of the Democratic Party. You're going to have a reincarnation of the Republican Party.
But I don't think that's the thing that's going to help. Like reincarnating these two parties that literally get on TV today and say, hey, how can we just, I'm not thinking on a conspiratorial level, but I'm thinking on the idea of that, hey, nothing's going to get done. We are going to yell and scream. And I think it's just the idea of politics. It's 17th, 18th century institution. It's great, this experiment. We have to be able to build and grow on top of it. We cannot continue evolve the great system that has been created by, a bunch of white farmers who migrated over here for a generation or two and rebelled against the British to create this great piece of paper that, like we've talked about, like holds up. And so many
it's
rules.
Very anti-fragile.
Very anti-fragile, especially in terms of law throughout the rest of the world.
Yeah.
However, how do we move on that next step? Because right now, I think the idea of having a bunch of old people go to a state capitol building and argue over this thing, when you have an idea of like the internet, where if someone wants to raise $200,000 for a cause or a thing they have, they can do that in 10 seconds or 10 minutes. Depending on how big.
But who says that? So these old people that are arguing, and it's this way for every generation.
Yeah.
The people who are elected are too old.
First of all, never saying it's unique. I'm just saying.
I'm just saying let's look at the pattern here and why I think it's good.
It's definitely the pattern. The elders of society, the people with the most maturity and experience, are usually those ones who rise to the top of leading us.
I'll give you the upside because we clearly understand the downside. They don't understand the hyper progressiveness that occurs right now with the internet era. Everybody. Even countries like Saudi Arabia, to some extent, have a modernization, even though they're one of the most barbaric regimes in the world. They even had a, what do they call it, Arab Spring. So they had some sort of modernization where they're allowing women to drive. There's certain things that this hyper modernization we're having, this hyper progressivism that's across the world right now. Mm-hmm. But the interesting part about the way that our government set it up is that we have these older gentlemen who are so decentralized in their decision making and have this mix of personal accountability with local accountability for the re-election cycles that things are going to move very, very slow in comparison to however progressive or conservative the desired movement of the administration is. So what you have here is you have like this super, what they call the weight of bureaucracy that weighs down massive changes, because the massive changes is usually what ends up causing significant loss. So although it's not advancing at the pace we would desire it to be, some things me and you often talk about, we're at the highest rate of literacy in the United States.
No one gives us a pat on the back for that one.
We have we educate the masses better than any highly populated country in the world. We educate college students at a higher efficiency than any higher population in the world. We still create technology per person.
Even though we only do 30% of people have graduated from college institutions, that's still a higher rate than the rest of the world.
Oh, we graduate. Let's talk numbers. How
many?
Oh,
numbers. Okay.
And in any other country with 100 million people or more isn't even in our class of graduating.
Indonesia's got 100 million more. They're a progressive Muslim country.
How many do they graduate from college a year?
I know.
How many does Russia? How many does Brazil? So in comparison to us, we're still a leader in mass population dynamics.
What are other 100 million plus countries?
China,
India.
Besides
that, I mean,
there's not that many, and that's because it's much harder to do when you're talking about this number of people.
Yeah.
You know what the most efficient states?
Even most European countries don't even have 100 plus million. I think Germany's at 80 or 90. I don't even think they're over.
Yeah, so a lot of them are smaller than that number. And for example, what are the states that are the most efficient in the United States? Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont. They're all running at a surplus because they're so small they can be efficient. And that goes back into what I see the movement of politics that you'll hopefully see is you'll see classic states' rights conservatism and federal government big money, because what we have right now are two big money federal government parties.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have anything else. You have a religious sect and you have a hyper progressive sect. The hyper progressive sect is the Democrats, which are more relatable to the educated coastal elites because that's what they read about in school.
Mm-hmm.
So they read about being hyper progressive and all their teachers teach them to be hyper progressive. Whereas people living in the real world often want things to stay the same because they don't have time to be hyper progressive. They need to live today. So they're never going to relate to let's change everything we're doing right now because they have to eat tomorrow.
Well, I think people can relate. They just don't have the availability in their budgets and their funding, or like you said, time to say, hey, I can go set out to volunteer and take part in this. I can take a 2 week sabbatical to go do.
Or I can eat organic. Most people don't have that option.
No.
So one of the biggest things that I think that you'll see in politics is you'll see more states' rights versus federal rights on spending. You'll at some point we'll be intelligent enough to really get down to the core issues of what two parties should be. Is they should be a federal government movement versus a state government movement, in my opinion. And once you create that party system, then you'll have the debates on who should decide how much you spend on things like healthcare, things like education. And what it's going to come down to is you're going to see us adopt an additional constitutional amendment that'll say all humans in the United States have a fundamental right towards healthcare. All humans in the United States have a fundamental right until the age of 18 to have 3 meals a day.
Mm-hmm.
And once you create this minimum standard of living, you'll see the United States once again lead the world in standard of living, because once you create a certain minimum that other developed countries have created through availability of food, availability of healthcare, you allow capitalism to innovate what I would say the surplus industries, things like technology, things that are progressive. You allow capitalism in the progressive sectors. In the human needs and human rights sector, you allow the government to create systems of, we'll call needs, and we allow states or federal governments to do that spending. Personally, I think when you decentralize the spending through states and eventually into counties, you end up having such small groups, it can be more efficiently spent and people can be held more personally accountable. So I'm a classic states' rights conservative, which lives in an era with where it comes to human rights, I'm very progressive. So if I care about humanity, I have to vote Democrat. But if I care about small government, I have no candidate to vote for whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
There's socialism, there's big budget religious judges and big budget liberal judges. So it's like, in my opinion, you need a re-education. You need a realignment of these parties to reflect what could be in the modern era. And it's going to be when people like, whether you like the four horsemen of the Democratic Party, AOC, when they're considered
Squad, baby.
the squad, when you consider them a veteran group of representatives, you'll see a different group of veterans on the Republican side as well.
Mhm.
And those two new parties,
We know who's that going to be, right? That's going to be Candy O.
I really hope not, but I really hope instead it's people with actual policy ideas instead of talking
Well, do you
points.
think she's just making talking points now?
Talking
Do you think
points.
she's, because we both agree she's very intelligent.
She's intelligent, she's just tapping into
Well, she's tapping into that right now, but like that's the whole premise of getting bigger or getting notoriety. And
I
the whole
prefer people with
selling
substance
your
first
soul.
and then selling.
But I mean, how many people get big just being on substance first?
Bernie Sanders is a good example of
I mean,
that.
AOC's crying in a parking lot behind a fence down there.
But she
That's-
built up on substance too.
Oh, well, originally, but yeah, going off and doing that. I mean,
She had a lot of, but she brought the publicity to support her substance. So she had a platform to run on.
But she was crying at a fence that wasn't the border wall fence. She was just trying to go do that and say, "Hey, everybody take photos."
So don't
So I
get
mean,
me wrong.
that's what I'm saying.
Criticize
They're-
all of them
they're
for
both,
publicity.
They're both there in order to, because that weird thing, like, hey,
I would
could
challenge Candace Owens. How many proposals have you done in the public sector?
Oh, AOC
that are-
definitely has more than her.
For sure. So what I would say is if you really want to make a difference, run, win, do something.
I totally agree. That's why I'll get mad at people like
I
who are
had
talking to
respect
me.
for Obama before he ran for anything. He was doing county level organization of I believe it was community events. So he was getting together with all these different local councilmen and getting these community events together to promote the different causes.
When I think about how Trump got big, he had to go out and say that Obama's not even an American and that he wasn't even born here in order to get that
that's my
notoriety.
problem.
But that's shitty substance.
Exactly. But see, it's the
Let me
Roger.
check and just make sure that it's
Yeah, let's take a peek. What are you tapping into? So, in my opinion, the worst part about the Republican Party right now has nothing to do with their politics. It has everything to do with their style. Their style is based on the Roger Stone style of politics.
yeah. Mitch McConnell is the worst.
Killed it. I sent you that NPR interview. Embedded did a great 7-part series on Mitch McConnell and the evolution of his political career. And if you haven't seen Roger Stone documentary on Netflix, these two pieces of political journalism will embody my issues with the conservative states' rights party that we have today. Because instead of coming with substance first and then putting whatever flash you want to put on it.
But I don't believe there's states' rights at all. There's, like you said, it's a complete charade or
We'll
facade.
We'll call it conservative. Whatever your
Conservative religion, like you mentioned. I think that's
Let's say
what.
repealing Obamacare. If you were substance first, when you won the House, when you won the Senate, and you won the presidency all at once, you would have had this very well-developed plan to implement that was based on states' rights, right? You would have shown that you have the substance
If
to
these states want to do it, they
to
have the
provide an
option.
alternative, and then when the congressional review would come, it would show that if states chose, it would give the same or better than Obamacare. And you would have got it. You would have had a huge win for the Republican Party. When you would have passed your tax reform, right now we just got a review of that. It's done nothing but cost the government money. It's given money back to the rich, and it's cost lower income Americans money. So we've lost money. Rich people have gained money from this tax reform. So instead of having a well-substance or a well-thought-out substantive bill that achieved the goals that it said it was trying to achieve, you have something that does what Republicans have been doing and many Democrats have been doing, which is creating legislation that gets some group rich who usually supports them. So when you don't have enough substance, you end up becoming the swamp that the entire Republican Party is now supposedly cleansing. So it's like there's not enough substance. You end up defaulting to the thing that was ran against here.
The swamp is what we say is the swamp.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem.
Instead of just identifying that the swamp is third-party interest, it's very simple.
Mhm.
And if we can eliminate, and the revolutions I see coming are, we're going to have a constitutional amendment for human rights. We're going to have a constitutional amendment to eliminate third-party funding, which part of that embedded journalism talks about Mitch McConnell's role, which he literally went in and told everybody that if they didn't vote to allow the corporate contributions, or if they did vote to allow campaign contributions, that the people giving them campaign contributions for the Republican Party will will guarantee that they will make sure they get reelected, and if they don't, they will spend that same amount of money on somebody running against them. So they literally were the closest thing to
Is that a primary source, like direct quote from Mitch McConnell?
Yes, this is public knowledge. He said in his quote, his response is, I told them what is realistically the consequences of their choices. If they were not to allow this, these entities would fund an opponent. But if they went against this bill, it was a John McCain bill, and they ended up losing, but then the Supreme Court actually ruled against John McCain. So they have to create a new bill, we still have the same problem. So we actually had a bill pass, and it was as law, and the Supreme Court overturned it. Citizens United.
What would you say we're at right now? Would you say this is a democracy? Well, it's definitely not a republic.
No, it's definitely a republic. It's just a republic that people don't realize their influence on the republic. We're at some of the lowest voting turnouts historically, even though it's been upticked the past couple of elections. Less than half your population votes.
Well, I mean, it's funny, like you said. First of all, you don't even believe me that I've gone to city council meetings since I've lived out here.
It's shocking to me because even I don't, and I consider myself a participating member of the republic.
I don't think you are.
I think I would agree in comparison to if you're going to council meetings, you're definitely more represented than I am because you're there.
Well, I mean, that's my biggest thing. Yeah, I'll be honest. I did not vote in the executive election.
Federal election,
yeah. We call it, for the executive branch of government, the president.
Uh-huh.
But I voted everything locally, voted everything municipally. I voted everything else in the place I live in order to invoke that change that I want to see. Because that's, as someone who believes in these states' rights and these individual rights, and I think libertarianism is kind of very selfish for individuals. But however, I think that you can make those changes that way that you want to see. You can be and you can implement those things on those local levels. And, we believe in states' rights. I mean, just let people, if you believe in free market capitalism, let people move from your state. If your state is so bad and people don't want to live there and it's not good, there's not a surplus in this, or there's not this human right, let there be socialized healthcare over here. Let there be this over there. And the clearest thing, like you said, would be in these federal reports, or the reports when they come out and say, oh, well, the Obamacare worked here. Hey, it didn't work here. Why isn't that working here? Simple checks and balances to measure how things can improve. But again, it's not happening that way in politics. The people who are in power are not letting those things happen. That's why I asked, where are we at if there's still so much levels of control on a power level of people that, have so much influence, whether it's monetarily or culturally, that they can place, less culturally, but they can place, people in power. They can use money to dictate how things get done. And people literally on the conservative side say, well, listen, if the rich people don't have money, how are they going to get me a job? That's a terrible mindset to have. Hey, listen, my livelihood is completely tied to that individual's influence.
It's a fragile relationship. So it's a fragile relationship that's also based on a scarcity model. So a scarcity model only exists in a mechanistic understanding where I have to get from here and then it goes to there. Now, when you start understanding things from a cyclic understanding and you understand that you want distributed cycles. So if you have a decentralized resource, it's much better than I'm dependent on a single thing. So that's why microbiology is so important. It kind of ties these themes together. The future of our politics will be one that is more synergistic. It's inevitable. Why? Because at some point, people are going to vote for people who get the things that at least what everybody agrees upon.
I was getting to that boiling point where people are literally like...
Cannabis is going to pass.
Yeah.
No matter what anybody felt about it, people agreed over time it's going to pass on a federal level. All these things that make sense end up passing eventually. And this goes back to the point I kind of never made, which was the reason that these old white people doing things in such a bureaucratic, such as decentralized, annoying way that nothing ever gets done works is because it moves it so slow, it allows us to get it right when we finally do move.
But I think that's the biggest issue. People want to see change
now,
right now,
and that's what every election is. Every election is we're changing everything now. If you elect me, that's not reality.
We're dealing with people. People don't move that fast, and people can't adopt. And
systems don't.
But we're dealing with people. We're dealing with technology that moves it. It's because it's not dealing with people.
Yeah.
It's dictating how we use things and how we incorporate things into our lives. And so, because politics is an example of a technology, like, hey, this is this. We're going to create this idea of these two parties, or 3 or 4. It's going to help the system run better. It's okay. Let's put this thing in there. But politics is 5,000, 4,000 years old, and as a monarchy and the evolving of these different tiered systems.
Yeah.
But it's something that takes time. I mean, there's 4,000 years of stuff we're just trying to rustle out. Hey, we got democracy, fascism, capitalism, all these different economic and political ideologies, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting now is people do change at a rate now that is unexpected. So the issue becomes is how fast does politics now match that pace? So when you start seeing, so people don't change from that era. The people in office right now are from an era of not changing at that rate. People in our era change.
Older than our parents.
And so when our parents become the people who are too old to be elected, which isn't here yet, but when they become too old to be elected.
Donald's not too old.
He's very close. That's what shocks me is that all the people we choose are right on the edge of losing it.
Death.
Like, okay, 5 years after the presidency, we wouldn't trust him with anything. Like, Obama was a young president. Like, I think we should start looking in that vein more, just as far as a mental capacity thing in general. But that's a whole other thing. But realistically, I'm losing the point completely here. Dang,
we're talking about the old age, and we're talking about our parents and the different.
So once this older generation moves on, and you start having these hyper progressive generation, because even the conservatives of nowadays are hyper progressive compared to the conservatives of 20 years ago.
I mean, these young ones are really promoting, whether it's like,
so
those young
the
conservative college
libertarians. My problem is that you're getting more radical versions of both. You're getting some very, very libertarian conservatives, and you're getting some very, very progressive Democrats. And what will end up happening is each party will get their share of movement. Because the other party exists, it will exponentially slow the other one down. So the farther you disagree, the less things happen. See how the system is kind of designed to never let crazy shit happen? Like, so if some radical party, the more things get... So eventually, people get...
It's like Bernie Sanders' last run for...
And people will get so sick of shit not happening that they're going to go, all right, we want people in the middle, because we just want something to happen. So then we're going to go... Right now, we're going through a sway. We went very, very progressive. We're going very, very religious, conservative, and unfortunately, Trump has now appointed over 20% of the federal bench, so we're going to be there for a long time because the judicial branch is the one that gets lifetime appointments and stuff.
Yeah.
So he's made a big swing in that branch for a long term. When it comes back, it will be probably even more progressive, and we might have even somebody swing harder than Trump the other way. But it doesn't have much more swings than that. It's an unsustainable increasing. And at some point, it's going to have to start losing. And when it loses, it's going to come back to middle, and you'll see movement. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, for now, we're going to try out all the crazy stuff. We're going to go super conservative. We're going to go super progressive. And our state system, the way it works, will allow us to play all these iterations out. We're going to see what works out best. And eventually, we'll progress into this new era of... in my mind, either sustainability or complete collapse.
Who do you like in the upcoming election? Who is pro-cannabis? Does anybody have any big legalizations?
Everybody's pro-cannabis. It's almost annoying because because this is the problem. It's become so commercialized and so desensitized that we almost missed the real issues in cannabis. We completely are going to ignore individual rights to grow cannabis. We're going to completely ignore classifying organic cannabis correctly. We're going to completely ignore living soil education and the differences between the quality of cannabis when you're dealing with living soil and you're dealing with hydroponic, that quote-unquote conventional, what I call chemical alternative farming. So realistically, what I'm hoping happens is we see a moment of interest and at the same time education of consumers and the general public. But really everybody's a very generic pro-cannabis candidate right now. Mm-hmm. So everybody's pro-cannabis. It's just a matter of where they land on other issues.
Yeah. I saw something about Kamala Harris putting a plan already or a proposal for if she were to get elected to decriminalize it federally.
Yeah. That's cool.
But I think there's an interesting one out of New York, because New York and New Jersey just passed medicinal marijuana
Okay.
bills. I'm not sure if there was recreational or medicinal.
Probably medicinal, but I'm not sure.
Okay. And, a group of black lawmakers
Mm-hmm.
completely objected to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you don't read into it and understand why, you would say, oh, these guys are just trying to ruin this. They want to make something for themselves. But
They said free the imprisoned people for cannabis before you go and make money off
not
of it.
just that, but also this idea of land ownership. Because
Yeah.
I think owning land is one of the best things to hold and as one of the biggest stores of value
Yeah.
as a human being. And if people who want to get into cannabis do not have land, I mean, you guys, you would know this just
You
in
get
general.
Killed.
And if you don't own land, but land is
And now they zone it and they make it.
where do
10
we buy
times the
land?
cost.
And if certain companies and corporations have the access
Yeah.
to this land, how do we bring in, whether they're going to be craft or just
Or even low income.
individual low-income growers
Yeah.
into this space? And
Yeah.
where do we let them allow, or where do we allot?
These are the real issues.
I thought that was like
that
a
are-
great thing that they
that's a-
stalled the bill in New York and New Jersey, in both different states, on that premise, because that's
Yeah.
a very, very, very hey, let's go back to the root here.
Well, let's at least.
Because that's not just for
create
black people. I think that's just for anybody, like we talked about before.
equal opportunity, and that's what we're losing here is we've created this non-equal opportunity for all individuals across the country to where I saw a commercial the other day where this company was like, we're not cannabis growers, we're businessmen who grow cannabis. I was like, that's the opposite of what we are. We were the people who made everybody, or were part of the movement, part of the community that opened everybody's eyes to the benefits and the financial possibilities with cannabis and the enjoyment of cultivating as part of a lifestyle. We are cannabis growers who formed a business, and it's the exact opposite of what I would say the privileged class of society that is trying to kind of poach the whole industry. So it's really awesome to see somebody in a new and upcoming area actually taking that into consideration and trying to actually implement it as part of law. Because out here in California, they have certain parts of the legislation that are supposed to do this, but it's very, very underrepresented. And I think what's really, really behind is doing things like, step one, how about before people start making money on it, you let everybody out who's in jail for it. So, and decriminalizing on an individual level.
Well, I think, what was it, 90% of people that are in prison are for small possession? Whatever
Yeah.
that number is. That's like, federally. And I know it varies from different states. But, I mean, like you said, can you make, we're talking about that sway in the pendulum of how far left or right of a decision you can make.
Yeah.
Can we just go in and say, hey, listen, if you have this small possession, go back. Like, just, hey, you're good to go. You're
They've
free.
done it.
I mean, I know
think
Obama did that. I know Trump's new tax prison reform did something along those lines as well.
Somewhat. I think Minnesota did all the convictions and everything. I have to check.
Power
into,
to you, Minnesota.
whatever state that was. It might have been Michigan.
Okay.
I'm mixing up the details, but I think that's the stuff that people should be hyper focused on, which it seems to be, I guess, occurring more than I know of. So it's something that I think is essential to the whole progression of how we treat this, because if we're not at least being aware of the damage that was done to families and individuals and their criminal records, and if nothing else, their lives, and allowing them an equal opportunity to engage in the industry that is now birthed from that sacrifice, you're not doing justice, in my opinion. So,
Well, in this state, the big prop or bill that passed was Prop 64. Or what happened before in the state of California? Was it decriminalized? Was it medicinal, legally medicinal? Was there any legality, the level of legality that was going on before Prop 64 and Prop 65?
So yeah, I would say so when we were in the medicinal era of legalization in California, we had a lot more personal rights. Individuals had a lot more rights. It was a lot more libertarian. So in certain areas, like I said, in my opinion, I agree with Nassim Taleb, who wrote Anti-Fragile, and he says, proximity determines your political perspective. With your best friends, you're a socialist. You'll give them whatever you have. With somebody you don't know, you're a conservative Republican. So when it comes down to cannabis, I give people the much more libertarian trust And in my opinion, because it's not a need, you won't need to go to socialism. You go the opposite way. It's not a need to have cannabis, but it should be something that you're allowed to do on your own, and it should be allowed to purchase, and it should be something you can have access to. So what the legalization ended up doing is it actually reduced access to individuals, and it provided for easier taxation of what they would call recreational production. So this is actually another example of big government version of implementation, to where we have a extreme amount of regulation that creates a bunch of local jurisdiction oversight, as well as state level jurisdictional oversight. So you have a multi-layered regulation that creates cost increase, creates an unfair starting point for businesses because the areas in which you can cultivate have been minimized. So, like I said, it's taken away a lot of the equity that was the California cannabis market and has turned it into a completely based on tax revenue system instead of one based on access.
So it's going shit?
It's just a swing back the other way. So it was very, very libertarian. It's going to be very, very regulated for a bit. And as people realize that the regulations are hampering the market, it'll get less and less regulated and get a little bit more libertarian. And it'll keep swinging back and forth till we find something that hopefully gives people the access they need, gives people the freedom they deserve when handling a plant, and most importantly, equal opportunity for everybody to be part of this economic revolution, because cannabis and hemp is going to be the #1 cash crop in America in the next 10 years. So,
yeah, I think you mentioned our video. Go check out that video. We took a tour of the PrivateStockVeterans facility. Is that it's going to be interesting when we start exporting this, American cannabis and American hemp to the rest of the world, especially if we put the kind of quality, whether it's in the private sector of like, hey, we want to make this the highest quality scientifically, medicinally, or whatever quality constraints you're going to put over it, and then sending that out to the rest of the world. Because that, like you mentioned in there, is going to be a massive cash crop for, U.S. markets and U.S. individuals to really clean up on.
Especially if we can standardize and differentiate our quality control methods. So if we can really embrace this regenerative polyculture agricultural model, and we start cultivating these beyond organic cannabis crops, and we start really creating America as the pinnacle of quality of life for plants. I also believe we should do it for humans, but focusing on the plants, we will really be able to create what I always have seen America as, which is we try to do things better. So if we can create a market, we're going to create very high end of whatever it is that you have to sell. So we take technology and we try to create the highest end version of technology. Fashion, we're trying to create the highest end. Sporting events, we even invented a bunch of new sports. Because
even our athletes,
the Olympics, everything we try to do is the highest end. So if we can get back to producing the highest end agriculture, and especially cannabis-based products, we have a huge opportunity to what I believe will become the world's #1 cash crop, to lead the way as far as the most valuable of the world's #1 cash crop.
Well, I think that's going to be 10 or 20 years, because I think we're still so closely tied, regulation-wise, like you're talking with Prop 64, what it's doing in California, to the federal laws.
Well,
and
let me counter you.
What about the 63 other countries that have our drug policies and drug laws around the world?
Once we change them, these treaties, many of them are going to become null and void on their face. So you'll have to write a new one.
We'll have to write a new one.
So that
is it as simple as just writing a new one?
Well, they become invalid the second you pass a law that legalizes hemp.
Yeah, but do you want to are we going to see that big of a radical stamp and change if that gets
the second you legalize it, it occurs. It's just
it will, yeah. But I'm saying, is that going to happen? Is it going to be like you said? We're talking about great crazy change happening in one fell
Chinese
swoop.
hemp seeds right now on Amazon.
Yeah.
How about that? So you can import cannabis from China right now. So it's already happening. You can go on Amazon, buy hemp seeds that will ship from China. So it's already happening. So when is it going to happen? I would say it already is. As it becomes on the books, the legal reality will force the treaties to be rewritten, or they don't exist. That's how legal functions work.
Of course. I'm just saying, we were talking about earlier about certain big political movements happening. Suddenly, no, it takes a gradual.
Well, this one's taking 20 years.
But I'm saying, but even like though you say like when the legality happens and it just, hey, we got to put this bill into place, and once it happens, all these things become null and void. that's just how it works.
Yeah.
That's going to be one solid big move around the world, though, when that thing happens, I'm saying.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's why individuals like Donald Trump, when his administration asked him if he wants to legalize cannabis, and they showed him the amount of work that it would take to do that internationally, the amount of treaties, the amount of things you'd have to do. No, I'm good off of that. I ain't trying to do all that. So it's going to take somebody with a lot of initiative who wants to make this a priority to do it and do it correctly. Same thing with human rights revisions. Same thing with healthcare revisions. Same thing with everything.
The black market. We have this big swoop and change. Does the black market disappear? Obviously, it's probably not going to disappear. It's still going to be there.
I think it's part of a duality. It's part of a singular existence that will never disappear.
Yeah.
So, once again, the black market versus the white market, I believe they're one. They're not different. So one is just
How so?
because it exists in everything.
Well, I totally, because then people who would say they're on the black market would say, "Oh, I'm more libertarian and free
You know,
market."
there's black market packaging. There's black market mangoes
course.
on the street corner. He doesn't have a permit to sell there. He's just selling mangoes on the corner. That's black market mangoes. So
Third world industry.
well, it's human nature.
Of course,
So
of course.
it's literally, in my opinion, it's inevitable. At some level, the black market will always exist. What will end up occurring is that high quality cannabis will be available cheaper from a corporation than your dealer at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's an efficiency thing, and that's why I say the regulations are inevitably going to be bring back down because they're too costly right now. So as they become more or less and less costly, the competitive pricing with your local dealer will become harder and harder for the local dealer to be worth going to.
How's the black market in California?
It's flourishing.
Why is it flourishing now?
Everything's overpriced, and there's nothing of really high quality in the market right now. And that's something that we're going to end up hopefully being one of the first brands that does so for the living soil market. We had a regulator come in. We passed our first initial track and trace inspection, and he said he's never seen a facility like ours. It's really awesome to see super healthy plants that are surviving off of just the nutrition being made available in the soil. And he said it's the only one like this facility he's seen. So when you start seeing more and more facilities with low cost of production achieve really high quality like we're able to do, because we're not business people doing cannabis, we're cannabis growers starting a business, and we're going to see more and more people willing to go to the store to pay the extra money for the product, because this product's worth spending the extra money on, and it's going to come with the quality control testing the regulations demand.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start getting a whole store full of products that are worth spending the extra money for, and furthermore incentivized by the government to lower that price through reducing the regulation cost, you're going to start competing with the black market pricing as well, and eventually it's an inevitability. It'll be at the same ratio you see other crops in the market. So there's always a black market for the next 5 to 10 years until we figure out this pricing and how we can create opportunity without stifling growth through overregulation. The black market will continue to flourish because the black market is a lot more anti-fragile than regulations are.
Agreed. But why is there such a low amount of quality right now in the
Businessmen growing cannabis instead of cannabis growers starting businesses. And it goes back to that same theme where when you create an unequal starting point and unequal opportunities for regular individuals to start businesses, you only get financing companies, bankers, marketing companies with good-looking packaging and crap product. Those are the only people who are going to get to market first, and the first people who are going to get to significant production size. So something that we also do is we own a distribution license, and we're helping a lot of these up north Humboldt area farmers who grow organically, who grow in the soil and the living sun and greenhouses as well. We're helping them distribute their products to some of these bigger markets in Southern California so that we can provide different pricing levels on really high quality product from cannabis farmers who started a business, not business owners who decided to get into cannabis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really took a deep dive into craft cannabis and all the different individual. I think the Swami, I think I sent you his stuff.
So you sent me something like that. He's an example of somebody who's a little bit split with someone like myself. So he has a very marketing based craft style. I wouldn't consider his product craft. So in my opinion, someone like himself has utilized image and marketing more than being a high quality cultivator. So I would say that there's even different variations of craft within what looks like craft right now in cannabis. There's things like Cookies brand that have a great brand. There's things like, now Cookies is indoor hydroponic, Swami is outdoor organic, but they're both based on their marketing more than the quality of their product. Where I'm more talking about individuals who are consistently producing higher quality products than like the Swami brand does. They produce a low tier product. It's in my experience, it's high priced, but something that doesn't really match up in my opinion. But
it's got a brand. It's got that brand
he's
recognition.
got a really good brand. He's really established himself as a
white guy who went to India and became
he has
a
his
Swami.
We'll call it a celebrity.
Yeah.
So he's developed his celebrity that fits his lifestyle. He has some of the same strains we cultivate.
What a smart white guy. Just another smart white guy.
So I mean, yeah, it's one of those complicated
appropriating cultures.
We'll call it finding identity. If he finds that to be truthful, I don't know him personally.
Yeah, no knock to Swami. Swami, no
I've
knock
just
to you.
smoked his flower. I understand
You know the Swami?
the philosophy behind it. From my understanding, it's a lot of what I would consider to be commercial organic, but it's not a high quality. What we're kind of focusing on is individuals who are looking to achieve craft cannabis, which I would consider different from
well, how would you define craft cannabis then?
so craft cannabis for me is individuals who are achieving